Hello, Moto Round World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking MotoGP, where we're going to be talking everything MotoGP from the latest round held at the beautiful, gorgeous circuit Misano Marco Simoncelli, I should say, out in Italy. I will be joined by Paul. It's just been a very rushed, late start for me, so I've only just sent him a link now, so I've thrown him under the bus. So we'll just wait for Paul to join, and then I'll give him a proper introduction after missing him last week. It'll be great to have him back on the show. But just looking in the comments, it's Harvey Lowe who is in pole position. Choof. A long time ago, what's a good 3-4 hours ago, Harvey was already waiting in there. What does everyone think about the terrible KTM fiasco? Ivan Pretorius once again in the podium position. Evening, Rob, and hopefully Paul. Yes, Paul will join us. Can't wait for the show. I must admit, I'm so excited to watch Mark take title number 9. Yvonne will definitely touch upon Mark and everything. Harvey will definitely talk about KTM. Brian Ritchie is third position in our podium finishes there. He joined a couple of hours ago. Greetings, everyone. Brett Lawson, evening, Rob and Paul. Couldn't watch the GP this weekend, unfortunately, but very interested to hear what happened and what everyone has to say. That's the beauty of this show, Paul, is Brett, sorry, I should say, is it really is a good catch-up for everyone, and we hear everyone's point of views and opinions. So, get nice and comfortable. We're definitely going to have a good conversation. David Callahan, Sebastian Tromp, James Thompson, outstanding weekend of race action. Looking forward to tonight's discussion. Jason Harrington, Wayne Taylor, Gary Granger, Warwick Evans, Paolo Chiacchetti, Adam Sweeting, Mike Maggot, Robert Mackey. Robert, how are you, my friend? Sean Van Rooyen, Al Camino, Van Erasmus, JP Swiek, Daryl Holmes, Ricky Brody, CP Boerts, David Hawes, Nico Parrott, Deep Sea Diver Smith, Alex van der Berg. Everyone is in the house. So I'm going to invite Sean and Ronnie Good. Long time no here. Hope you're all well in the land of the UK, where I am from now. But let me introduce my co-host. I'm pleased to say, Paul. Hello, Paul. How are you doing?
Hey, Rob. I'm well, thanks. And you?
Yeah, good. I did tell everyone that it was my fault that I did send you the link late, and it's just been a rush. But It's great to have you back. It's great to have you back.
Cool, man. You're in new background because of a new beginning. And Rob, I just hope this internet connection, it's supposed to be very good. Let's hope that it works out that way. So this is going to be a little bit of a trial run. But nice to be back, and great weekend of racing. And I think we've got a few things to chat about.
We do have a lot of things to chat about. One of them being this Bezzecchi, Ashley Belden. Hey, hi, Rob. What can I say, Bez? Yeah, we're definitely going to touch upon the fantastic, brilliant that is Bez at the moment. Warwick Evans has got some comments. Ollie Moto's in the house. Always great to have Ollie Moto and his comments. So, everyone, glad to see you back, Paul, after we missed you last week. Had a good discussion last week, but we'll before we jump into last week that kind of takes us into this week, we'll just quickly touch upon the other South African riders that we had represented in Moto3 and Moto2. Shane Woodley in Moto3, good job, good solid job again. I think this recovery from confidence, injury, and everything is still ongoing, but 16th place I think it was overall in the Moto3, which is a very competitive class. What a race again. That Moto3 is just the talent that's coming out of there at the moment is incredible. So a good solid job from Ruche in a very competitive class, but it's all about just building that confidence to get himself back to that level that we know he can be at.
Yeah, Robin, we've been saying that, throughout the season, and he has had a couple of injury setbacks, and now he's doing exactly what we would expect. He's building, he's finishing, he's bringing the bike home, and 4 seconds ahead of his teammate, which to me is a fantastic result. So nice to see, and really good. Now let's just hope that in a couple of weeks' time we can get him in the points, because he's right there. And it just shows how competitive it is that a guy like him is struggling to get 1 point. So, this field is stacked, but I certainly believe he has the talent, and I can see it happening in the next couple of weeks. 15th to 12th is just as competitive as 1st to 8th. So if we can get him in there, he can get 1 point or he could get 6 points. And I think that's obviously his goal and his focus, but certainly a great weekend for him and doing what we would want him to do, bring the bike home and be competitive. We don't want him to come home and be last and like a no-hoper, but he's certainly not that. So really a good weekend, I believe, for them.
And then on the flip side of that, in the Moto2 category, Darren Binder looking spectacular in the Cressini livery that they ran, that special Cressini livery that's become a custom now at the Misano home round for them. Look, we can go on and on and on and on and on for as much as we want. At the end of the day, it's just not working for him. Whether it's a confidence thing, whether it's bike setup, whether it's team environment, whatever the situation is, it's not working for Darren Binder. And we're certainly not seeing the best of him. And again, it was just it was a. I'll say this in a nice way. It was a terrible weekend again for Darren.
Yeah, we're not going to kick the can when it's going down the road, but things are not going the way he would want, without a shadow of a doubt. Whatever the reason is, we don't know. It makes it a little bit harsh when his teammates doing relatively well. I think Arenas was 9th or 10th. That's a long way ahead of Darren. If he was finishing 12th and 13th, you could say, well, he's there or thereabouts, but it's certainly not working out, whether it's the stress of not knowing what's going on with his future, or if it's just not working, I don't know. But every week we just hope and pray that things turn around for him. It's certainly not looking good. We know he hasn't got a ride in that team for next year. What is going to happen, I don't know. But he's certainly not putting himself in the shop window for whatever the reason might be.
It is, a couple of people asking the question. Yeah, there's been rumors about, BSB paddock looking likely for him. There's been a strong link to a Ducati team in BSB coming out today. From my side, to be honest, I've heard nothing. I know nothing. BSB is a tricky one. It's a good career move in some ways, because I think it's a solid championship. It's a good foundation to potentially rebuild himself, a la Scott Redding, who went there, won a BSB title and went back onto World Superbikes and, came runner up to Johnny Ray, I think it was. But, had some good competitive years in World Superbikes. So it was a good kind of foundation to rebuild his career. But on the flip side of that, it can also be the makings of the end of your career. Lots of riders have gone to BSB, haven't made it work, and you just get lost and forgotten there. I'm using John McPhee as a more recent kind of one, who's gone from the highs at one stage in Moto3 to now in BSB. Not many people know he's there and not really doing much. So it's a very tough championship because of the conditions, the rules with the bikes and the electronics and no electronics, and the tracks are probably the hardest thing. So let's see. I just want to see Darren Binder racing at the end of the day. So hopefully he can find a good team, find a bit of form, and just rekindle some of that Darren Binder magic. I want to see a smiling, fast Darren Binder, something we haven't seen in a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, you've been to, I presume, a lot of the BSB rounds. World Superbikes to me would be a better option, purely because he knows a few of the tracks, not all of them, and it just seems to be a more, I don't want to say professional. BSB is fantastic, but their tracks are very different. And as you say, it could make your career or it could break your career. And, it's such a fine edge to be on. And once again, the top teams in BSB are so competitive. To go there in a lesser team, you're not going to be putting yourself at the front of the field, and you've got to learn the tracks. And so I don't know. Me personally, I would like to say, if there's no MotoGP future for him, whether it's Moto2, Moto3, whatever, I personally, I'd like to see him take the World Superbike route, if that option is available for him.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see how it plays out. But at the moment, the strong rumors linking him to the BSB paddock. So as soon as we know anything, we'll definitely share it. So stay tuned to Motor Rider World, and hopefully we can be the first to break the news on Darren. Let's just hope that he's on racing a motorcycle. That's ultimately what we want for him. So I was just trying to look at a caption here. Ollie Motor, with all due respect to Darren, it would take a lot for him to go to BSB and be in the mix for wins early on. It's very different to Moto2. World Super Sport would be a better fit for him. So yeah, Ollie Motor, pretty much your sentiments there, Paul. And I agree in many ways, but if we could choose, that it would be a great life. It's not up to us at the end of the day. So Paul, last week, unfortunately, you were busy, so I kind of just handled things myself, and I was praising KTM because I thought they did fantastically. I praised them for how they've brought stability to this project, and even though we've had to be patient, we're finally starting to see positivity coming and more pace, and just in general, just a much better positive vibe after everything they've been through. Well done to everyone. Patted them all on the back. Brad didn't get the results that he wanted to last time out or deserved at Catalunya, but the pace was there from all the KTM riders. Bastianini looked fantastic. Viñales is kind of an anomaly at the moment, coming back from injury and that, but sang the praises, just went on the roof and screamed KTM in my KTM orange hoodie. Fast forward a week and they literally can't keep the chains on, this is the brutality of MotoGP. And this unfortunately is where it's really hard to be a KTM. I'm a KTM fan. I'm a KTM fan because of Brad and everyone in there. But this is where it's hard because they go from highs to absolute lows. I was optimistic going to Misano, even though I knew the track offered a lot more grip than like Catalunya, and the KTM works better on low grip circuits. And I know that whole conversation, but I just thought they're in a great place. Let's go. Bastianini's looking good. Let's go. And it just didn't work that way. I mean, from the first session, Pedro Acosta kind of flew the flag solely as long as he could up until race day when Brad took it over and did his best there. But a weekend where 3 chains came off, most crucially for Pedro Acosta when he was looking so good. I watched some of those passes, like that onboard where he came past one of the VF, I think it was Morbidelli, on the brakes from miles back. And he was just looking so good. And I thought, okay, this, when Pedro rides like it, you can't help but be a fan. You really can't. He was spectacular. And then for his chain to fall off. And then the frustration was there already from Brad when it happened to him, I think in one of the sessions. And Brad never really shows any kind of, emotion to the camera, and that's certainly, but on the bike and scream, you can almost hear him and feel him screaming at the bike. And then for Pedro Acosta to park that bike up, give it the middle finger and then walk away, just tells you it's a frustration that we from the outside feel, but it's now coming on the inside. So not a great weekend. 3 chains should not be coming off bikes at this level.
Well, Rob, I was talking to a mate of mine. I honestly can't remember when last we saw that on the racetrack, the chain coming off. It's just simply unheard of. Yeah. So for those of you that do listen to the Oxley Bomb podcast, please log on, listen to it. It doesn't cost you anything. And Peter Baum, who used to be a crew chief in MotoGP, explained, I don't know if you heard that, Rob. Yes. So turn 7 at Misano is one of he thinks the only track or the only turn, it's more a sweep than a turn, where the ride height device is lowered. They are flat out through the corner and they're running long swing arms as long as the bike can handle to take a grip off the back wheel. They're trying to move the weight bias forward by doing that. And he's saying KTM were the only people not running an additional chain guard, chain blocker, whatever you want to call it. And he thinks that's the reason why. So, now when you saw the thing on the Aprilia, they even had photos of it on the internet saying, what is this thing? Were KTM just caught with their pants down that they didn't realize they were going to extend the swing arm? And I mean, we're not talking 3 foot. What are we talking, Rob? 10 a centimeter, 2 centimeters? Yeah. That just shows what those margins are, which we've discussed in many ways and many different things. These margins are so fine. So now KTM, to me, sounds like they got caught a little bit, not expecting with the full ride out device, all the grip, faster lap time. So clearly they're going faster. And this happens to them 3 times. Yeah, it's very disappointing. But that's, the preparation other teams did, put everything in place to avoid that. And certainly Pedro Acosta is on a good run of form. But now after this, what does it do? It sets him back. Imagine being his crew chief or one of his Mackies, and he's pulling zap signs at the work that you've done over the last 3 days. It's hard. It's going to cause discord within the team. Very disappointing. But I'm going to say it goes back to Aki Aya has to take some responsibility for it. Why did they not realize this could be a problem? So it's disappointing, for all of them.
Johnny Martin says, I hope there's an investigation around the chain issue, as it can potentially be very dangerous to the whole pack of riders. I saw Peter Baum make that comment, and it makes full sense of why it was happening, because, as you said, it's not like it was happening at Catalunya or anywhere else. Wayne Taylor says Viñales' chain came off in Jerez 2023 on the Aprilia, but it very rarely happens because of the ride height and everything. But again, it sounds like such a simple thing, like just, okay, well, you need to put extra chain guards on, or guides, just, to kind of counter this problem, which every other team did except KTM. So I do think it was a case of they got caught with their pants down. But this is the frustrating side of the KTM project, and being a fan of it. And Brad Binder, you can point fingers at riders and whatever. This is where KTM let themselves down, and we saw the frustration that we hold and get to vent every time. We saw that from the riders this weekend. So listen, it was brilliant of Brad to come out on Sunday's race, and pick up a top 10 in those grueling conditions, from 16th on the grid at a difficult track, with everything that happened on the weekend, to keep his cool and do that. Brilliant. But for one KTM to be finishing on Sunday, especially after all the good work that's happened over the last couple of races, they finally found this momentum. They finally found a bit of stability. These kind of things shouldn't happen. And Pedro Acosta came out and said, at this level, these things shouldn't happen. So, as you said, you're trying to keep everyone on board and positive. And then when these things happen, it's a massive step backwards that they've now got to try and go all the way to Japan, and find their confidence again. Listen, Japan, Brad's performed there. He's qualified on the front row. It's a track that KTM have, produced the goods at before. But let's see. Let's hope that they learn from this lesson, because it wasn't good enough. Positive signs after that in the test. Pedro Acosta was fastest in the test, faster than his Q2 time. So they definitely found something there. Brad and Bastianini, I don't know the different testing programs that they were on, but they definitely seem to be more long runs and not focusing on lap times, where Pedro was focusing on speed. So that a little bit of a light at the end of what was a very dark tunnel for KTM this weekend.
Yeah, Rob, absolutely. And as you mentioned, so all that good work I'm not saying it's going to be undone in one weekend, but it certainly puts a damper on it. Yeah, they'll analyze, they'll know exactly what the faults were, and they'll deal with it. But that's, the horse is bolted, the stable door is open. But as you say, one thing I'd like to say, with the drop-off that Alex Marquez had towards the end of the race, had Pedro stayed in that race, I think he was well in for another podium. So that's the disappointment. If he was running 7th, 8th, 9th, maybe you say, well, so what? But, podium was almost there for the taking. We'll never know, because Alex did drop off, but he had no one chasing him. So maybe he would have upped his pace by half a second. Who knows? But disappointing. I think Japan will be a different story. This was almost an anomaly in the terms of MotoGP racing. But still, you got to deal with those. You can't let this happen. And, had it just happened to Brad or just happened to Pedro, we would have been miffed, but we would have said, it happens. But now it's happened to their two top riders. So it really was dropping the ball big time. And they now have to regroup everybody, because, to see Brad on the side of the track throwing his hands up, you just don't see that. You don't even see him in the pit box. So imagine that, we've always said these guys are giving 110%. Well, there you saw the disappointment from both Brad and Pedro. So anybody who thinks these guys are just there to ride around and do this is their heart, soul, passion, and that came out from both of them, unfortunately in the wrong context.
Yeah, absolutely. Heimdom, I agree with you. This is the frustration of being a KTM fan. They have these spells of brilliance, and it does tend to come like now towards the end of the season, and then it starts from a blank piece of paper again at the beginning of the season, and we got to deal with this whole kind of inconsistency and be patient and stuff. So it has been a theme of KTM's MotoGP kind of project, especially over the last couple of years. And the most frustrating thing for me was, after such a positive Catalunya, where I was so impressed, and you have to pat them on the back for overcoming everything they've been through, and that to be let down by something, and it's a part that if you had a 3D printer in the back of your garage, you could print and make up at a €10 cost or something. You know what I mean? It's something as silly and minuscule as that. So that's the frustration of it all. Just Ian Johnson, please understand, I think you're getting the narrative wrong here. By no means are we going against Pedro Acosta, and
no, absolutely not.
We are fully on his side. I think Ian's just got a little bit wrong here, because I think he maybe thinks we're accusing Pedro of throwing his toys out the cot for no reason. No, not at all. I'm fully on Pedro's side. I was watching Pedro and I was so impressed with him on Sunday again. He's starting to really look at one with that bike. He's pushing that onboard where he came from miles on the brakes and he passed one of the VR46 machines. There was a rider riding with confidence, and I think that's why Pedro had the outburst with a middle finger, because
absolutely.
there was a podium finish potentially or another top four. These riders thrive on consistency. And Pedro has really been this consistently fast lately, and this is just a spanner in the works. So it is a pity for him, and for Brad, because he's also starting to find a bit of consistency. So it's a frustrating time. It was a very frustrating and horrible weekend.
And also, Rob, going to the Pedro, I mean, we've always said he's an absolute star. Before this happened, he could see, not only did he pass Digi and Morbidelli, but he could see Alex ahead of him. And the rider knows immediately, even if he's only closing at 1 or 2 tenths, he can see that. He knows without a shadow of a doubt. So I think that was part of Pedro's frustration, was that he had such good pace. The bike was working well. And then, it's a different story if it blows its guts out. I think they realized this is really something that could have been avoided. But anyway, so now they need to deal with that, the team as a collective, and I think that they certainly will be back. Pedro at the moment is looking superb. I mean, I really, you've said it many times. Aki and the team have said, patience, patience, patience. And it's been paying off. But this weekend, as we say, they dropped the ball a little bit. But I do believe that Japan, they'll be back to full motivation, full strength. And now they'll probably have more of a point to prove, because they should have got a result and they didn't.
Yeah, Wayne, I agree with you that in Catalonia all the KTMs were good, and this weekend it was really Pedro. The frustrating part for Brad and Michael, I also agree with you that Michael's saying, Rob, surely 10th from 16th to 10th at a track like this is brilliant from Brad, and it is. It's fantastic. I didn't see a top 10 on the cards because of the layout of the track and the weekend that Brad had. The frustrating thing for Brad was he wasn't allowed to get into a rhythm to go and attack. As soon as he had the chain issue in the one practice, then a technical issue, he just didn't have any time to really go. Bastianini was a little bit of a weird one for me. I thought he would be able to come from Catalonia to here and really make a step forward. He battled the whole weekend. It just wasn't in the mix. Maverick Vinales, for me, I mean this in the nicest way possible as well, as I think they should still have Paul Espargaro on that bike gathering data. I think Maverick is just a passenger on that bike. He said it in his post-race thing. He's just a passenger on the bike with his injury. I think he needs time with that injury, and all this time Paul Espargaro could be going around there collecting more valuable data. So that's just my opinion. But from a Brad point of view, it was frustrating because he wasn't allowed to get into the rhythm. Pedro, again, making the best of whatever's thrown at him. That's one of his strengths. And I think the biggest frustration, and I think that frustration that you saw come out there, was not just the fact that he was on good pace, he was potentially podium pace. I think Wayne Taylor and Oli Moto commented on we're over a year now, a year and a half into Pedro Acosta's MotoGP career, and he still hasn't got a win. And this is a rider that deserves a win. This is a race winning rider, and he's had to sit back and watch the likes of Bezzecchi winning on the Aprilia and getting better, and Di Antonio winning races, and Morbidelli being more consistent and faster. All these guys around him that he knows that I am a better and faster rider than these guys, and I'm still not able to win. And I think that's the biggest frustration for Pedro Acosta at the moment, and for his fans, is there's a rider that can go out there and get the job done, and he's just not. It's the same kind of frustration we have as Brad Binder fans. I'm not saying Brad Binder's every race weekend winner, but certainly he's an every race winner, race weekend podium challenger, top 5 challenger, the odd race win challenger like we've seen. And they are not able to show it because they're either being let down by KTM, or what ultimately it is being let down by KTM. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nothing to add to that, Rob.
It's a frustrating watch, and like I said, for me, after praising them last week, I was really hoping for them to back it up, and they just didn't. But speaking of praise, someone mentioned it at the top of the show. Marco Bezzecchi came out again. I can't put this guy on a high enough pedestal at the moment. Marc Marquez, with the dominance that he's been, and everything that's been around Marc Marquez, deservedly so, because he's just been the man of 2025. But Marco Bezzecchi just deserves as much praise as possible. in that sprint race, he beat Mark 1-on-1. Mark crashed. I know that, but I think it was because of Bez and the pace that he had that Mark crashed. He knew that once I passed Bez, I've got to really step this game up because Bez has got the pace. So Bez put the pressure on, and Mark crashed. Kind of like what happened in the main race on Sunday, where Mark was putting the pressure on Bez. Bez made that slight mistake. Mark went through, and then it went. But this was a weekend where Bez pushed Mark to the absolute limit. We've talked about it, like in Hungary and stuff, where Mark was riding at 80, 85, 90%. He had more in him. I don't think Mark had more in him this weekend. I think Mark pushed himself to the absolute limit, and Bezzecchi was not far behind. So to pick up the sprint win, taking advantage of the crash first of all, but to be, what was it, half a second behind Mark come the finish line on Sunday, just Bez is there. Bez has taken the biggest leap out of any rider this year.
Yeah, and we've said it how many times since the injury to Martin. Bez has stepped up. Took him a little bit of time to find his feet in the role. And I said it 2 shows ago. I said, I hope Aprilia now don't start leaning their focus towards Martin as opposed to Bez. But there's no ways they can do that. Bez is the man of the moment, without a shadow of a doubt. As you say, Rob, Mark got past him in the sprint race, but he was there. He didn't, he was putting pressure on Mark. Mark says, he lost a bit of focus through a left-hand turn, crashed.
Yes.
Well, that'll teach him. You can't lose focus. Just because you've got ahead of someone doesn't mean you've beaten him. And then in the main race, at one stage with about 4 laps to go, Marquez really put in a hot lap. I think he did a 31.3 or something, and he really dropped the pace. And it took Bezzecchi 2 laps to just match that pace. And then Mark was kind of, I don't want to say Mark was rattled, but certainly Mark had no more to give. Because if he did, he would have set another faster lap and he would have opened the gap. Instead, Bezzecchi closed that gap and he kept the pressure on. Even if you listen to Alex Marquez even said, no, those guys were just so fast that, with a third of the race to go, I just gave up because I couldn't run their pace and I wasn't prepared to risk falling off. So, big ups to him. I was quite surprised to see that Marquez was voted as rider of the day for the main race, because I think it should have been Bezzecchi. Because in all fairness, we're accustomed to seeing Mark in the front and winning. Bezzecchi was putting pressure on Mark Marquez, which in the last third of a race, we've hardly seen at all this season. So, that Aprilia and that rider have certainly upped their game 100%. They really are taking the fight. And let me tell you, Pecco Bagnaia is not sleeping well, because he had a shocking weekend. And now what's he? I think he's 7 or 8 points. From 26 points ahead of Bezzecchi, his third place is suddenly in jeopardy. And the way that he's riding and whinging at the moment, he ain't going to finish third in this third in the championship. So, looking very promising for Bezzecchi, and big kudos to him. He's just put his head down and let his riding do the talking as opposed to anything else.
As Ian Johnson points out, it has been a big step up by Bezzecchi. But again, Aprilia, first of all, for making the choice of Bezzecchi. I was one of those guys that went, Bezzecchi or Bastianini. I would have probably gone Bastianini, and Bezzecchi in a factory team, maybe going to get lost a little bit. We all had most of us had those doubts, and he really has stepped up. So that's been the positive start of Bezzecchi that deserves a lot of praise. Then there's the Aprilia side of, we talk about KTM and how well they've done through the black clouds and everything they've been through. They spent all their resources and money on getting the number one rider. He crashed his brains out. They haven't had access to him. They've had Savadori. They started the season off badly. They were thrown spanners from every single angle, and they've come out and they've, with very limited budget and resources compared to the other big manufacturers, and they've come out now as Ducati in many ways as biggest challenger with Bezzecchi. So kudos to that whole combination. I think they've done a fantastic job. For Jorge Martin, an arrogant champion like that is Jorge Martin, to on purpose go out and follow a Bezzecchi, to try and learn and get the pace. First of all, kudos to him. Sometimes you've got to put your pride on a pedestal, as Mark did at Honda, and go, I need to follow to get pace here. So I like that move from I don't always like, the tagging, but in this situation, Martin can only benefit from learning from Bezzecchi. So he did well, and it got him into Q2, which is always the first prize. So a couple of things, that he did right there this weekend. But that's a massive pat on the back to Bezzecchi. And, you know, I watched his debrief afterwards and he said, yeah, it's nice to see that kind of thing happen, because it's a giant pat on the back to say, Jorge Martin, MotoGP world champion, that is and was supposed to be the number one rider in that team, needs you. You know, I think that speaks volume in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And also going back to the point that for a lot of the Italians, this was their main home race. Yeah, Mugello is not too far from there, but Misano, they based there, you know. So there's a lot of additional pressure that comes with racing there, which I think Pecco Bagnaia buckled under a little bit. But Bezzecchi certainly loaded all that pressure on his shoulders, climbed on that bike, zipped up his leathers, and took it to the finish line. So, yeah, I'm certainly super impressed. Not just with him. I think the package, he's moved that package. And I was very impressed with Aleix Espargaro last year as their test rider, racer guy, moving the package forward. Then it got stagnant. But certainly Bezzecchi seems to be able to move it week after week after week. I also think, which I've said previously, I think Ducati have got certainly to a peak where they're not moving forward as fast as other teams. But that's kudos to Aprilia, who probably have, I don't know, a third less budget than Ducati, yet they seem to be making the biggest strides. So it's fantastic to watch. And, you know, just imagine if we took Marc Marquez out of the equation. Probably over the last 4 rounds, Bezzecchi's been the best rider on the track. So, really impressive without a doubt.
You know what impressed me even more with Bezzecchi over the weekend, and we can bring Mark into the conversation. Rossi's home track. Rossi there, we all know the Marquez and Rossi thing. It just never seems to go away. But every time you go to Misano, you're going to be reminded. Mark crashes out of the sprint race, cuts to the crowd cheering it. You know, when I saw that, it happens in all sports. Listen, you watch football and a guy scores an own goal for that. You know, the only difference I would say in motorsport is there's more of a risk factor. So the fact that Mark got up and walked away, you know, I can kind of deal with it. I never like seeing that kind of thing, but you know what? It's sport, it's competition, it's Rossi, it's Italy.
Passion.
It's passion. It's passion. So I'm fine with that. But what I will say is, if I was sitting next to those guys, I would have pulled them down and said, "What are you doing? You're just fueling the fire. What do you think Mark's going to do? Don't do that. You're just going to rattle Mark, and he's going to come out and destroy everyone on Sunday," which he did. But what I will say is, Bezzecchi, being part of the VR46 Academy and the whole Rossi thing, you know, was obviously on Rossi's side and had this bit of pull towards Marquez. And Bezzecchi came out this weekend and said, "Now that I'm more mature, I've a lot more respect and I get along really well with Marc Marquez."
Yeah.
And I think that took a big thing, especially to do in Misano after everything that happened. And I think that's probably the best word to use for Bezzecchi, is this maturity. While everyone is still going on about this, and no, you have to hate Mark. You can't like Mark. He took Rossi's 9th world title. You know, this hatred that these guys are holding on to for whatever reason. Bezzecchi's gone, no, I'm matured now. There's a rider that I respect, and I think the whole Bezzecchi exercise is just that, you know, this boy has grown into a man. He was a boy in many ways in MotoGP, wanting to stay in the VR46 team, which I thought was the right move. But, you know, because he was a boy, I need to be in this team where, you know, it's my family, and making this move has forced him to grow up and be a man. And there he is. Olimoto, I know a lot of Marquez fans will cheer. That's what I'm saying. I know a lot of people were, these Rossi fans, and how can they do it? I didn't take it like that. I took it more a case of, what are you doing?
Don't poke the bear.
You are poking the bear. This Mark thrives. Same as Rossi. These guys thrive on that. Mark would have watched it, and that's why Mark's celebration was the way it was. If the fans did not react like that on Saturday, Mark's celebration on Sunday would have been completely different. It would have been champagne on the podium, yay. But now, taking the leathers off, the Messi style, holding it, and you see just how he crossed the line. This is a guy that's dominated the year. That's won 7, 8, or whatever it is in a row. Did you see how he crossed that line? And he was like, it meant to him, because he was like, well, take that. So I'm not worried with the fans rejoicing that Mark crashed. I was just like, but what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen?
You're not going to upset him.
So that's my two sides of it. Is that I was proud of Bezzecchi for coming out, and kind of the mature side of Bezzecchi to almost put to rest that whole thing. It's just going to go on and on and on. There was a VR46 guy coming on just saying, you know what, forget it. It's not. It's in the past. There's a great rider. I respect him. I'm more mature now. And then the flip side of it is the Marquez conversation with the fans, and I came out and just went, okay, well, you want to cheer? I'll show you. I'll show you what to do, and I'll dominate. Well, not dominate, but I'll come out and win on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing. It's never bothered Mark. I don't think he's appreciated the boos and the cheering, but it's never bothered him. And like you say, you're just upsetting the guy to the point that he's like, okay, well, now I'll show you what I really can do. But Bez, to me, going back to talking about Bez, he's just shown a maturity that, like you say, that I like your analogy, the boy to the man.
Yeah.
Last year he was the boy. He was call him the favorite son in the team. And this year he stepped up. They put all that responsibility on him and absolutely deserved that spot. And I agree with you, Rob. When they chose him for the team, I was like, someone's got to be a second rider and he'll fit the role. Jeepers, and circumstances changed, and this guy stepped up big time. So, very, very well done to him, and he deserves all the accolades that are being, his name's being bandied about everywhere, and he deserves it rightfully so.
I think there's little things to touch upon. Alex Marquez in third again, another strong weekend from him, showing that pace that he showed early on. He had a little blip the last couple of races, but Catalunya came back fighting. You weren't on the show, but I said for me that was the best version of Alex Marquez that I've ever seen. Again, he beat Marc Marquez one-on-one in a fair fight, and he went and dominated. This weekend again did the championship thing, competitive. While Pecco Bagnaia and these other guys were making mistakes and suffering problems, Alex Marquez was sturdy, solid, and fast again the whole weekend. And again, another notch in the belt that I am an established good MotoGP rider now, and I'm here to stay and be competitive. The question last week, Paul, that was posed to us was there was a lot of talk that Alex must go and replace Pecco in the factory team, and that I came out, and subsequently since then, Alex Marquez has come out and saying, I don't really want the factory team. I don't want to go compete against my brother in the same colors. I am the main man in this Cressini team. I'm more than happy here. Yeah. Just give me the latest spec Ducati, what my brother's going to be on, and I'm happy. And I think that's the best environment, as I said last week, for Alex to go and do what he's doing.
Robin, I've said it many times in the past. Alex learned long ago. And when I say long ago, in his MotoGP career, his very first year in MotoGP, if I remember correctly, was the factory Honda team with his brother. He learned then he cannot race with Mark, maybe on the odd occasion, but week in, week out, his head says to him, Mark is a better rider. He can deal with that. So what I think Alex is doing very wisely, he had such a great start. He went 6 or 7 races at the beginning of the year, second, one first in the sprint, one in Spain when Mark crashed. Other than that, seconds consecutively. Then he had that little blip, as you mentioned. Now he's back to his consistency. He's cementing second place in the championship. Now, you and I discussed it at the beginning of the year. I think it was even the preseason. Does Alex Marquez deserve his ride? Well, it'll be very hard for anybody now to say, no, he doesn't. Even if you can't stand the guy. He has deserved his. He's ahead of the factory Ducati, Pecco Bagnaia. He's ahead of every other Ducati, except his brother. There's other GP24s there. He's giving them a solid hiding. So I think without a shadow of a doubt, yes, the bike suits him. And as much as we'd love to say, imagine if Brad Binder had that bike. Imagine if Pedro Acosta had. They don't have that bike. Alex has taken that opportunity with both hands, and he's made it count. And barring some sort of an injury, he's got second in this championship locked up. And that's what I think where his maturity has been.
Yes.
He hasn't raced Mark to the point that he crashes. And he's now, like this weekend, what did he pull on Bagnaia? 17 points, 19 points. He's racing Bagnaia for second in the championship, and he's going about it the right way. He's just got to be very mindful of Bezzecchi. But while he's getting a third and Bezzecchi's getting a second, Bezzecchi won't catch him. So I think he's doing a sterling job. And like you say, he's happy in the team. He cemented his place, and he's deserved it after maybe round 3 where we were still like, when's Alex going to go back to the old Alex Marquez? Well, he's proved me wrong without a shadow of a doubt.
Just going back to a question here from Danny Ferreira. Do you think Martin on a factory Ducati would be as competitive as Mark? My answer to that was, I don't think he'd be competitive as Mark. I think he would win races, and I think he'd pretty much do what he did last year. He would be competitive and be up there, but he wouldn't be doing what Mark's done this year, winning, wrapping up the championship by Japan type thing and winning 7 or 8 in a row or whatever. I don't think there's any other rider on the grid. I mean, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago when we did the poll of, anyone else in the Ducati, who would it be? But yeah, I don't think there's any other rider on the grid on a factory Ducati that would do what Mark's done. That's my opinion. And everyone in the comments, feel free to answer.
And then the question also, Rob, and we've got 2 distinct Ducatis here, the 25 and the 24. Mark can make the 25 work better than Pecco. Would the question relate to Martin being on the same bike that Alex is riding now? I think he would have been very competitive. I don't think he has the mental fortitude to race with Mark week in and week out, but I think certainly he would have been better than Alex, mostly. But unfortunately, it's a question, same as what would Pedro Acosta have been like had he had the Ducati? Then would he have had the 24, the 25? It's an unknown thing. If you relate it back to last year, Martin struggled the whole year to beat Bagnaia. They fought tooth and nail, and he got him at the end. And we've said it many times, mainly due to Bagnaia's mistakes as opposed to Martin's winning. Yeah. So, correlated like that, I don't know. Yet certainly on the 24, I think it would have been very competitive, but not week in and week out.
The conversation of Pecco Bagnaia is coming up now in the comments, Paul. So, we can jump to that. In the show last week, I said, coming to Misano, this could be the reset for Pecco. And watching that Ducati behind the scenes video that they put on YouTube, I can never remember it, but I love watching that. And after Catalonia, Mark's sitting in the car with Pecco, and Pecco says to Mark, almost like a confession and a little bit of a therapy session, he's just like, I just can't believe that I've gone from winning races last year and being so competitive to where I am now. And in their little banter, little conversation, Mark literally says, well, it's Misano next week. It's reset. You just got to reset, kind of thing. Just go. Yeah, and you can see in those videos, it's clear that you can see in those videos, Pecco's deflated. Pecco's had the life sucked out of him. And, I agree with what Matt Berto's saying is, I know a lot of people have written him off that, he's done and he's finished. I certainly wouldn't go as far as that. There's talent and speed there. There is. He's proven. He's a 2-time MotoGP world champion. There's talent and speed there. I'm still in the thinking that even if everything was going his way, he wouldn't be able to challenge the Mark that is now. He'd be challenging more. He'd certainly be challenging Alex and Bezzecchi a lot more. I think Marcus has taken that step above everyone. Something's not right there. Paul, last weekend I said I was very disappointed with Pecco Bagnaia, and that's hard for me to say because I'm such a big fan of him, and I don't like ever saying those things about any rider really, to that extent. But I was really disappointed with Pecco. For me, he down tools at Catalunya. I don't know if you watched the race and that, but certainly in the Friday practice and that, he down tools. He was riding around in 21st place and 23rd. Pecco Bagnaia doesn't do that. Then I use the analogy of, you look at Fabio Quartararo, Pedro Acosta, Brad Binder sometimes, on packages that aren't competitive, but they dig deep and they make them competitive. Even if it's for 1 lap or 5 laps or so, they find something. Fabio Quartararo has been doing it on the Yamaha. I use him as the best analogy.
Yeah.
So Pecco should be able to dig deep and even just override for a lap. It's probably something. There should be something, and he's just not able to do it. And again, at his home round, a round where he dominates, where there's more Pecco shirts than anything, where this is it. This is your confidence builder. VR46 is in the house, your master, your mentor, your fans, your family, everything, your dog, everything is there. And he was lost. I had to look for Pecco in the race when they showed him crash. I went, "Oh Jesus, Pecco! This is his home race." It's a sign of the times, but something's got to change. I know in the testing, I think Alex Vandenberg pointed it out. In the testing, he basically went to the 2024 bike, the forks, the everything to try and find something. I don't know. We've spoken about this so many times. I think Ducati are scratching their heads. Tardozzi, Gigi Dall'Igna everyone's scratching their heads. I mean, how did it get to this? How did we get to a point of a 2-time world champion on a bike? Okay, this bike was developed around the Martin, and the Pecco DNA from 24. into this 25. I mean, Digi's hasn't completely figured it out, but he's figured it out a lot more than Pecco has. I mean, this. What's the answer? What's the answer?
Yeah, I don't think there is any straightforward answer. Just going back to Digi. So Digi has made it work in the last third of a race, predominantly. Yeah, he's had some cuck days, but generally the last third of the race, you always see his pace pick up. Even this weekend, he was faster than Morbidelli, but the gap was a little bit too big for him to get Morbidelli at the end. But still, he seems to race till the flag stops or comes out. I think Pecco, after 3 guys have passed him, which seems to happen with impunity now, he's like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm going to ride around till the flag comes out or till I fall off. He just doesn't seem to have, and he's always saying, I'm not comfortable. I can't find a setting that works for me. I'm not sure if it's just the mental beating that he's taken, because every time and let's not even look at the qualifying results, look at the race results. Every time he comes off the track, sprint race, MotoGP race Sunday, sprint, what does he see? First or second? Marc Marquez. That's his teammate. He should be beating this guy. And I think that's more the issue than the bike. Yes, he hasn't settled on the bike from day one. That we are fully aware of. But he doesn't seem to have the ability to ride around the problem, whatever the problem is. And it changes from week to week, which to me makes it seem that he's not actually sure what the problem is. Is it the front end? He's always said he's got no feel. But then the next week he's moaning because the bike doesn't want to turn in properly. So I don't really know. So I think it's a mental issue more than a physical. Yes, definitely the bike's not doing what he wants, but I think mentally he's taken a hammering, which he never expected. And what we don't see is maybe he's getting this from the back of the garage, this Valentino Rossi, you got to beat this guy, you got to beat this guy. I don't know if that's happening, in the undercurrent, but certainly mentally he's frazzled, and that's what he needs to change.
Paul, this begs the question, bringing Valentino into the conversation as his master, his mentor, the VR46 Academy leader. For Pecco's sake and for the sake of his career and his confidence and everything, when does a Rossi step in and go, right, that's not the environment for you to be in? Depending on how next year goes, Pecco's definitely staying factory Ducati rider next year. But certainly for 27 and onwards, does Rossi and Pecco's representatives go, right, this is not the environment for you, Pecco? I'm hoping next year goes better and the bike's better and whatever version of a Ducati they bring out. My worry for Pecco's side is he hasn't given any kind of input into a GP26 model. Mark has, Alex has, DJ Antonio has, maybe Morbidelli has, but GP26 is, for sure going to lean more towards what Mark's feeling is, and rightfully so, because he's dominating. I know people are going to jump on the bandwagon and go, he's going to do exactly what he did at Honda. Honda are going to build a bike for him that no one else can ride. It won them 6 world
championships.
Why wouldn't any man? I've had this conversation before. I don't think Ducati will take it to that extent, because Ducati Gigi has this ability to make a very adaptable, usable bike. We're seeing Fermin Aldeguer thrive from this. We're seeing a lot of riders thrive from this. It gave Jorge Martin a world championship. It rekindled Alex Marquez's MotoGP career. So it's done. So the problem for Pecco is, I want him to go into next year and be more competitive and cool. Pecco's found his confidence. He's winning races again. He's challenging for top 3 and top 2, challenging Mark more. Cool. Problem solved. He's a factory Ducati rider. The world makes sense again. I'm worrying that, again, this GP26 is going to lean more towards Mark. Pecco doesn't find the Pecco that we know is there, the talent and everything that's there. And at what point does a Rossi and them step in and go, right, not your environment, let's go here. The problem is here is a developing Yamaha project, which we'll talk about just now, with their V4 coming out, and a very inconsistent KTM, a Honda that's getting better, but still has its, and an Aprilia that, we don't need riders, thank you. We've got our 2 men, depending on if Martin jumps ship or whatever. So
Yeah.
It's a sensitive situation that Rossi does need to come in and handle, get the chip off the shoulder if there is still one, and with Mark, and kind of get that off and focus on Pecco here and say, right, Pecco, this is what we need to do for you now. So it might come a year too late, though. Does that extra year in the factory team next year with Pecco, does that become the breaking point for him, where it's 2 years of being pounded in the ground by Mark, and Mark's doing this in such a nice way. You watch these Lenovo behind the scenes videos. It's not like Mark's being this arrogant bastard that's not talking to Pecco. He's trying to be there for Pecco, and whether that, I think it's all sincere and nice. I know there's a lot of people that say, that's just Mark being Mark and doing it in an ugly way. I see a sincere Mark going there and saying Pecco, he wants Pecco to be competitive. But cutting a long story short, does another year in factory red as Mark Marquez's teammate do Pecco more good, or does it do more bad? And at what point do they step in and say, right, let's cut this, let's end it before Pecco's like really broken and damaged goods, and let's find pastures new?
You see, that's the $1 million question, because Pecco will say, no, we'll reset and next year is going to be good because we're going to make changes to the bike. And exactly what you say, Rob, they're going to build this bike. The very few changes that they're allowed to make for next year are certainly going to skew towards Mark's side of the garage, and rightfully so. And I fully agree with the sentiment. But then they're going to build a bike around Mark. He's winning. Nobody else is winning. And the next guy on the Ducati who should have the say will be Alex Marquez. Pecco's dropping down the pecking order, and he needs to, whatever it is that needs to change, mental fortitude, stop moaning, I don't know what it is, Rob, but certainly next year is going to be tougher for him if he doesn't start to think differently. We know he's got the speed. There's absolutely no doubt. Like you said 1 million times, he's a 2 times MotoGP world champion on a Ducati. I think what's frazzled him is the fact that he knew Mark was going to be good. He just didn't realize how good Mark was going to be at adapting to a bike that might not have been the same as last year's bike. Mark has adapted. Pecco struggled to adapt, and that's the big difference. And I think that's the difference with the Mark Marquez, a Valentino Rossi, a Casey Stoner. When they've needed to make those subtle differences and changes, they can do it. They have that instinct that says, this is what I need to do. Where Pecco, and I'm going to say Martin, and maybe a Brad and a Bezzecchi, it doesn't come as naturally as an ability to make those incremental changes. And I think that's what's caught Pecco out this year. He's probably tried different things, but it's a collective thing over weekend. But now he seems to be going the opposite way, where, as you say, Rob, like in Barcelona, you feel that he just gave up. Yeah. He can't afford to do that. Not in this field, and we've said it how many times. We're talking tenths of a second. We're not talking like he's 1.5 seconds behind. It's that mental fortitude to be in the game week in, week out. And when things are not going well, and I'm going to use Pedro Acosta as an example, I'm going to say almost without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to bounce back next weekend and fight like heck for a podium. Pecco hasn't done that this year. When things haven't gone his way, you haven't seen him the next weekend get through to Q2, load up in the sprint race, and we saw him in Mugello give 3 laps of the sprint race flat out. Then he just as soon as someone overtakes him, regardless, seems to frazzle him for whatever reason. Whether he sees, like you mentioned, that pass of Pedro on Morbidelli, does Pecco see a guy come up the inside of him and think, geez, I can't do that? And then his mind is out of the game. I don't know. But he's certainly going to have to think long and hard about where he's going. And you're quite right. Is it a case of another year of this next year? And his brain could be shot. So he's in a very difficult situation at the moment.
Paul, I'm just leaving this comment up here because I want to come back to it. But you make a very good point, and I want to have a little bit of an argument with Andre Calvert in the comments, but I also want to tell him that I love his videos that he posts on Facebook of his beautiful kiddies riding their bicycles and stuff. I love watching him. So keep those coming, Andre, but I'm going to have an argument with you just now. But Paul, you've just kind of brought something to mind while I was listening to you there talk about Bagnaia. And it kind of makes sense. Bagnaia's spent most of his MotoGP career, certainly the last 3 years, running at the front. Not really having to mix it deep in the pack and whatever. And as we know, with the aerodynamics and where MotoGP has come, it really has interfered with the bike's performance and how it handles and everything. I'm wondering now if, Pecco started the season off okay, actually. He wasn't at the pace, but he was still finishing on the podium. That's why he's still third despite everything that Pecco's had in the last couple of races. The guy's still third in the World Championship, and that was from the foundation early on. So there was definitely something early on. And listen, to his credit, early on from day one, he said, "I don't like the feeling of this." So it's not something that has just crept up. It's something that's been there. But now that the confidence has kind of waned a bit, and this is a rider that won at Kota, let's not forget, So he has won, and he's been competitive this year. It's not like he hasn't been competitive. But now, as the confidence gone, and other teams have got Foster, the Bezzecchis and the Aprilias, the KTMs, and whatever, more competitive, Pecco's finding himself, qualifying is not going well, but he's finding himself in this mid-pack. And exactly what you say, as soon as he gets past or doesn't get a start, he can't seem to find an answer. And I wonder, now that you say it, being in that environment, surrounded by other riders, if that is upsetting the feeling of the bike with the aerodynamics and and all those situations. If you look at Mark and Alex, their best races are always the out front, and they kind of can command. They don't really have this interruption. And I'm just trying to think now, there's race weekends, and this is just my mind just going off on a tangent, but there's race weekends where DJ Antonio and Morbidelli are just nowhere. And it seems to be when that Ducati has other bikes around it, if you know what I mean, and it kind of disrupts with the aero, maybe doesn't like certain things or something. So I wonder if it could be a situation of Pecco's biggest problem with the bike is, but then it doesn't really answer why he can't go fast on a single fast lap then. But certainly, I think you've highlighted one of Pecco's biggest problems, certainly of late, is when he doesn't get a start and he finds himself in this pack. He doesn't seem to have an answer for the pack, and more times than anything, he actually goes backwards in that pack.
Which we can't answer that question, and Gigi and everybody are seeing his data, and we know Marquez said to him, when you've tried everything on the bike, maybe the problem's not with the bike, which is and I think that was a while ago. I think it might have been a subtle way of Mark sort of kicking him in the nuts a little bit. But certainly Mark has been trying to encourage him, which is easy for Marquez to do now because he's got such a big lead. It's easy to be nice and cushy. But maybe 6 races ago, those little digs got inside Pecco's head and hurt him a little bit, his psyche, that suddenly he was like, geez, I just don't know. And I think it's a very difficult question and answer for Bagnaia. We've tried to analyze it. Digi Antonio's on the same bike, and specific. So going back to your point of Pecco being third in the championship, if Bezzecchi had the start to the year that he's had in the last 4 races, Bagnaia wouldn't have been third in the championship. Bezzecchi took a while to filter into that role. New bike. Bagnaia didn't change a thing from last year to this year. Yes, a different bike, but the environment, the team, the personnel, the way they tie their shoelaces, that nothing changed. Bezzecchi's had to adapt. So I think he's very fortuitous to be third in the championship, which we're not at the end of the year, so I can't see him staying there. But I just think he needs to, I hate to say it, Rob, because I'm a nobody, but I hate to say it, he needs to put his big boy panties on, Stop crying, get in the race. Who's a good example of this, I think, is Quartararo. Yes, he crashes a lot, but he's riding on a bike that should be finishing last. But Quartararo's had 4 pole positions. He's always in Q2. You never know, okay, the last couple of times, Q1, Q2, fastest time in Q1, almost putting it on pole in Q2. Every lap with him, you can see, because when he makes a mistake, he shows you, he's upset. But every lap is I'm on the limit and win it or bin it kind of attitude, where Pecco seems to be, well, let's ride around and hopefully I don't have a bad day. That just seems to be the 2 different mindsets of, 2 previous world champions, one on equipment that should be second in the championship, if not winning it, and one on a bike that should be last, and he's running 5, 6, and 7. So that's where you see mental fortitude in this sport is equally as important, if not more so, than pure raw talent.
I think Fabio is the best analogy to use, and I think it's a case of maybe Pecco needs to go steal a pair of big boy panties from Fabio. Deep sea diver. Why I've got this comment up here is because it could make a lot of sense in many ways. Is, you know, at some point Rossi's going to have to take Yamahas. Yamaha pay him a lot of money to be an ambassador and have a Yamaha logo on his cap. Yet he goes and spends that money on leasing Ducatis and wears a Ducati shirt, you know, on race weekends. So it's a weird one, but that could be the answer. You know, Rossi say, Pecco, you're going to have to just finish out your Ducati career. Hopefully we can find something, but, you know, you could be our leader come 2027 once they've developed this Yamaha V4 a bit better. And, you know, that could be the perfect environment for Pecco. I think Pecco's going to need an environment like that to reset. Is this VR46 Academy, you know, everyone around you, you're the man, don't worry, you're the leader of this. You don't have a Marquez next to you. You've got probably a DG or a Morbidelli or maybe an Aldegui or someone, but you can handle them. Don't you know what I mean? That kind of environment. So that's just why I've held this deep sea diver comment up here. And then just to quickly, I want to have my argument quickly with Andre, even though I do love the videos of your kids. I just want to get this out there. And this is going to be a nice argument. I know people always say this. If it won them 6th, then how did, you know, where's it now? The Honda is not bad and where it is now because of Marc Marquez, Andre. My feeling. This is my feeling only. It's not where it is because of Marc Marquez. It's where it is because Ducati did this and Honda were not being managed right and did not have procedures in place to go there. And Marc eventually gave them an ultimatum because it was a bike that Marc couldn't even ride. So they had lost the plot and then Marc left. So I understand the argument that everyone goes, but it was a Marc bike and then he rode it and then where's it now? And that's all Marc's fault. It's not Marc's fault. For me, it's Honda's fault. So there's your 8 cucking, Andre. Don't ever take me on again because I'll stop liking your videos. Enough.
Thumbs down on those videos, not thumbs up. Yeah,
thumbs down. But anyway, I don't want to waste precious time on it. It's just it's a conversation that has come up a couple of times, and I just look at it and I can never make that connection of it's Marc's fault where Honda is. Speaking of Honda, yeah, I know you talk about rider of the weekend was Bezzecchi, and I fully agree with that. Pushing him for rider of the weekend for me is Luca Marini again. I mean, we talk about Bezzecchi's praise and what he's doing there, which is fantastic. I agree. Luca Marini is doing this with Honda slowly but surely. He's been the most consistent rider apart from Bezzecchi and Marc, probably the last 4 or 5 rounds, and he's not crashing. He's doing all of this for Honda, not crashing, bringing home the data, and just so he's my unsung hero so far for 2025. I really do think. Again, he was one of those guys, Honda, Marini, factory Honda. That is a prestigious ride in the world of MotoGP. And you're giving it to Luca Marini? Yeah, I was one of those guys until I spoke to him at Silverstone. And I've said the conversation many times. Hearing him talk and the way he presents himself, I was sold. I was like, this is the man for the job. And there he is, proving his weight in gold. He is the man for the job. And he's taking Honda. You know, he's never going to be the guy that's going to go win races and win championship for Honda, but he's certainly going to put Honda on that platform to get better and to improve for then a top rider like potentially a Pedro Acosta, a Fermin Aldegui, or someone to then go and take the bike there. So yeah, Luca Marini, another weekend where I just pat him on the back.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. There's nothing more to say. You know, if you think of Zarco, he's won one, he's finished second in another race, and then he has his weekends where he's just absent. But he's done that, we've said it, his whole career. Marini, like you say, last year, and we've highlighted it how many times, what did he get? 4 points the whole year, and one of those was because someone got a tire pressure penalty. This year, he's consistently, yes, he's not going to win anything, there's no doubt, but he's consistently in that 5 to 8 bracket. He doesn't crash like his teammate, and sometimes Mir's been very unlucky. He's been taken out, but when he hasn't been taken out, he's managed to crash on his own. Jean Mir, that is. Luca Marini, and for Honda to re-sign him for a rider that hasn't got anywhere near a podium or a win just shows how much belief they have in him, because there's no doubt the bike has improved. It's certainly not an Aprilia. I don't believe it's close to the KTM even. I also don't think that Marini and Pedro Acosta are on the same level. So KTM have a better rider, in my opinion. But Marini's doing what you've said all the time, Rob. He's gathering the data in a meticulous way and in a way that he can explain it to them that they can make the changes that are needed. So going back to Andre Calvert's thing about no one could ride the bike since Mark, Marini's trying to make it a bike that more people can ride. And it seems to be working. They've had a bit of bad luck with Somkia Chantra, which injuries and, so take him out of the equation. The other Hondas have been okay. They've shown moments of brilliance, and that's all you ever want, is to make sure that week in and week out you're improving when everyone else is improving. So I think the Honda whole story, and I do give a little bit of credit to Aleix Espargaro. He clearly knows how to go about assisting with developing a bike. But I think the biggest up in the Honda team at the moment has to go to Luca Marini for his, not crashing, bringing the bike home, gathering the data. And as you said, Rob, he knows how to put the words into practice to explain to the engineers and the guys back in Japan or wherever they're doing their development to make this bike a better package. So it's really, he's fantastic at the moment and really doing well for Honda.
Deep sea dive, right? Don't make me come after you as well now. We've ended that conversation. Chris D, very good point. How much of a role has Aleix Espargaro and Albiciani from Aprilia made? Well, clearly that's also, as you've just pointed out, that's been a great addition to the team. Well, we talk about Mir, and I know Zarco picked up the win at his French round this year, and for most of the season he was the great Honda man. Unfortunately, as we said, he just goes into these no-man lands where he just can't buy a result. Mir's the same. The frustrating part, I would say, for Zarco and Mir is they've been competitive in situations, but they're still crashing. Zarco's on 20-something crashes now, Mir. And you've got a rider in Luca Marini proving that the bike doesn't crash at a good pace, at a top 10 pace. You know what I mean? So there's conflicting ideologies or styles or some, in Honda they're going, we've got this rider that's improving our package that never crashes, and we've got these two guys that are foster riders on paper and in the stats, and they can't keep the rubber on the track. So it's a tough one for Honda. There has been improvements, as you said. They've lost a lot with not having that fourth rider really contributing anything. Somkia Chantra, that'll change with Moreira potentially coming in. I don't think it's fully been announced yet, has it? I know we've all talked about it. It hasn't.
I would imagine in Japan, possibly.
So Diego Moreira coming and bringing his input. Then you've got four riders really inputting there. So, but all credit has to go to Marini, because he's just he's doing things that I don't think any of us really thought, and to be doing it, not crashing, is absolutely fantastic. Moving across to the blue side of the Japanese stable, that's Yamaha. It was a big weekend for them. Showcased their new V4. I think it was Alex van der Berg or someone said that Yamaha and that plain blue, it looked absolutely beautiful. I love the fact that they launched it like that. And off Augusto Fernandez went and he raced it at Misano. Not quite the results I'm sure they were hoping for. I watched a video today actually on YouTube of the development of the V4 with Dovi and Fernandez and all the testing that they've done heading into Misano, and they still know it's a package that needs a lot of work and needs a lot of refinement, but it needs that race kind of conditions. The guy, the manager of Yamaha was saying testing's all great, but you need 20 other bikes on the track with you and the surface and the race weekend conditions to really see where you are. Picked up points, 14th. I think it was more a case of other riders crashing and not being competitive more than the V4 and Augusto doing well. 61 seconds off, so a minute in 14th. Fabio Quartararo and Jack Miller had their go on it in the testing. Fabio Quartararo coming out not having great things to say. I think the frustrating thing for Fabio Quartararo is he needs this V4 to be a plug and play. He needs to climb on that bike and it to be competitive. And the fact that he climbed on it now for the first time and was like, no, I'm a second off what I did on my old bike and I have no feeling with this. Fabio is not at this point of understanding. He's giving his all every race weekend. Like you said, he's pulling rabbits out of hats what he's doing on that bike. But he's at that point now where I need this V4 to be the answer. And after this first test, it's not the answer. Yamaha's side, Quartararo's got no experience on a V4, so how does he know what's good and what's bad? He'll know, he's judging it by lap time and obviously a little bit of feeling. Yamaha knows it's a patient game. But watching that video today, the lead technician, a Japanese guy behind the V4 project, was like, this was very a last minute thing, so we were thrown into this, which the Japanese don't like. He still used the words like brave and stupid, and he really was like, we had to really get out of our shells with this V4 project. We couldn't be this conservative Japanese anymore. We really had to come out of our shell in that. So the whole thing after watching that today, the whole thing feels a bit rushed to me. And I know you're developing a V4 potentially for 2027. It'll just be a case of taking one of the pistons out or something to make it smaller. But like the manager also said, it's not a case of just plugging a V4 engine in. You've got to design the whole bike around this.
Yeah.
So as good as Fabio was on the weekend, and credit to him again, like you said, coming out of Q1, being in the mix with Mark and them on that Yamaha, it shouldn't be happening, but he's making it happen. But then there's a frustrating side of the Yamaha project where he climbs on and he goes. I think if you had to have an interview with Fabio now, honestly, as a mate, talking on the couch type thing, he'd be saying, I need to find a Ducati for 2027 because I cannot do this waiting game anymore. And he was really relying on climbing on that V4 on Monday and feeling something positive. And from the sounds of it, he didn't have any positive feelings. So that's a real kick in his teeth.
I hear what you're saying, Rob. Part of me agrees with you, but it's also the first time that they've raced the bike. And if you have a look, there was a thing on social media that said Augusto Fernandez on the V4 was faster than Miller and Rins on the inline 4 yesterday at the testing. So that just shows that there's potential. So, and I think for Fabio, I understand he wants to jump on the bike and he was hoping it was going to be a second quicker, and it wasn't. I think he needs to give it time. It's a project still. They definitely rushed it. There's no doubt. I hope he's not kind of saying to them, well, throw in the towel for next year. Let's just run the inline 4 and be done with it, because they might be selling themselves short. I understand he's ridden both bikes. He makes that assessment and he knows immediately. I hope I'm wrong in saying that. I think also having Jack there, Jack's ridden V4s in the past. Hopefully his input, and I don't know how much input he's had before this weekend. Hopefully now he's ridden the bike and he can say, okay, X, Y, and Z, and see where that moves the project. So I hear Fabio. I was a little bit disappointed in what he said. Is he being too brutally honest? Is he kind of saying, listen, this is cuck, let's just leave it? Or is he being so honest that it's being a realist? It's a very fine line between being just dissing the product or being a realist and saying, we can get this done. So I don't know. To me, reading his comments, it just seemed like someone who's like, this is rubbish. Let's just, you've wasted your time. And I hope that's not the point, but time will tell. But that was just the sentiment I got out of his comments.
I think it's very much like Oli Moto and a couple of other people in the comments say here, though. I think I from what I saw on the weekend, as we know, Fabio wears his heart on his sleeve. It's
for sure.
The guy he is, So I think it was more out of frustration. It was more a case of this was supposed to be the answer, and I didn't feel anything that gives me any signs that this is the answer. And that's where the lack of professional management comes in. Same with Jorge Martin in a way. I know these. Fabio Quartararo's best friend is his manager. I was with my French team this past weekend. With Zero Motorcycles, we did an event out there, and they're also very close on the ground, and they're a lot more in the hub of MotoGP. And Francois, the country manager there, made a very good point, and I've completely forgotten what it was. No, man. You see, I'm tired now. I'm tired and I'm grey. I'm tired and I'm grey. I'm tired and I'm grey. Every day I wake up and there's another grey patch, which I don't mind. I want to go all Richard Gere. I want to go all Richard Gere, but it must just happen now. What was the point I was going to make? I can't remember the point I was going to make now. Oh, yeah. He said, so Ducati, he's got very close connections with some very high people at Ducati. And he said, and we know what makes Ducati so good is They take the rule book and they go right on that fine line of the rule book, and that's where they put. Whereas the Japanese will always play well under that rule book. It's just the way they go. That's why this poor little Japanese guy on this video was like, he was almost shaking. Like, Yamaha forced us to make this V4, and it's like out of our comfort zone. We had to, make the head gasket this thin, and we had to really just do everything. So it's not in their nature to push and rush things, but they forced to now because Fabio's going, this needs to happen. But then there's also the side of the management where proper management needs to come out and say, Fabio's manager should have tapped him on the shoulder and said, Fabio, take a deep breath. Okay, let's delay this press conference by 10, 20 minutes. Just like those couple of years ago with Jake Dixon, they should never have put that mark in front of him because that'll forever scar Jake Dixon for me as a fan, with what he said about Daniel Rinder. You got to manage moments. And I understand what you're saying. I understand it's called brain fade, Rob Dennis. It is called brain fade. I understand what you're saying. I understand Fabio from a rider's point of view because I would probably do the same in that situation of everything that I've been through. I've given Yamaha, they've given me a lot of money. That's fine. But I've given them time and energy and my body and my mental. I've given them everything. And this V4 is still not the answer. So I'm going to go and be honest because I'm frustrated and I wear my heart on my sleeve. We all know that. But then there's the management side of his mate or Yamaha that should say, right, just let's delay this by 10 minutes. Let's just talk about this. Understand where this project is. This is the first time this motorcycle has gone out in race conditions. Misano was also a tricky one for me to do it. It's such a quirky track. Catalunya for me might have been or something better, like a Sepang or something. But anyway, that was a decision. So the management side, I think, is what's let Fabio down. But Fabio's biggest problem, I think, is he's looking at the Mark exercise going, Mark's refound his career. He's going to be a 9-time world champion now, and because he made that decision. At what point does and this is going to be Fabio's problem as long as he stays with Yamaha. There's always going to be this little piece in the mind going, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. You want Fabio is not 100% committed to that Yamaha. He can't be. There's a 10% going, it's time to jump ship and climb on a Ducati and go revive my career. And that's the problem. So when he climbs on that V4 Yamaha and it's not what he wanted it to be, that 10% lights up.
Yeah, it suddenly becomes 15%.
Right.
No, there's absolutely no doubt, Rob, because he's one of the few riders that's not on a Ducati that still has some pulling weight to get on a Ducati. I'm going to say him and Pedro Acosta. I don't believe Bezzecchi will be looking at a Ducati, and I don't know if Martin will be looked at by Ducati. So the only other one, I think, so between him and Pedro, and I'm not talking for next year, but when a Ducati seat becomes available, they've still got a lot of pulling power. But because you see with both of them, you're getting 100% all the time. I think that you're quite right in saying if that's his mindset, next year is going to be very dangerous for him because we saw last year, halfway through the year, he kind of gave up, but then he regenerated himself towards the end of last year. Obviously, it helped signing a multi-million euro contract, but that's been done now. He's living with the effects of that signature going forward. And I hear you, he's quite right. He wears his heart on his sleeve, which is 90% of the time is very good. But that 10% of the time you need to know, and that's a maturity thing, which you said, look at Bezzecchi. He's filtered into that role. Quartararo has been Yamaha's number one man for the last, 4 years. He should be in that. No one should be saying to him, hey, Fabio, yes, we understand, you're passionate. I got no problem with him weeping when his bike broke at Silverstone. It was a guaranteed win. But here's a different story. Here we've got to be a little bit circumspect about how we approach your words. So I think they need to manage him a little bit differently. But he's also someone who I do think no matter what happens next year, he's got pulling power to say, pick me when there's a Ducati seat available, a la Pecco Bagnaia seat if that becomes available. So I read his words to be very brutally negative.
They were.
And that doesn't do much for the team spirit and the poor Japanese oak who's worked his guts out. So such a fine line, Robert, really is, different story for Ducati and Bezzecchi at Aprilia because they're doing well. So it's easy to say, we don't have to make changes or we made a little change here. And these guys, the Hondas, the Yamahas and the KTMs, They're fighting for the scraps, and they don't want to. They want to be fighting for the main meal, and it's just not working out. So yeah, it's a delicate line to tread.
As the Great 481 says here, they are going to let Toprak test the MotoGP before the Valencia test. Do you think they will put him on the V4? So the Great 481, from what I hear, Toprak will be on the V4. It makes sense if that's what they're going to go forward with next year. I think he'll get time. He'll probably start time on the current bike. You don't want to put him on a brand new V4 to go learn the tires and everything. Then he goes and scraps the thing. But I think he'll spend most of his time on the V4 once he's comfortable. That's an exciting prospect that Yamaha also have to look forward to. They've got a V4 maestro in many ways in Jack Miller. He spent a lot of time on V4s. They've got that good foundation there. A Toprak is going to bring something. He's got that touch, he's got that skill, he's got that feel. He's going to bring something. There's no doubt about that. So there are things to look forward to. It is just a frustrating. I could put myself in Fabio's shoes, and I would also be mightily frustrated. I've forgotten about the money. I've forgotten about the 12 million. I'm now looking at this going, geez, I'm giving my heart week in, week out. I'm pulling rabbits out of that, but that can only happen for so long, So, as you said, it's a fine line that they're playing there, because at the same time, this is where I think the management or Fabio's friend manager needs to come and grab him and say, listen, exactly what you're talking about, team motivation. You can't go out there and do this, because all you're doing is denting these poor Japanese. These guys aren't big Italians that can take it. These are delicate flowers, these Japanese guys. They've put their heart and soul into that engine, and if you go tell him it's cock, that's like telling him his wife's ugly, and they take it serious. That to them, that's their life. They really do take it personally. So it is a fine line that he's playing with, and he does have to be careful. But I can understand the frustration. It's Yamaha have got big work to do. Yamaha have probably got the biggest work to do, and Fabio Quartararo sugarcoats it by doing what he's doing. Luca Marini is bringing it up, not getting the results, the top threes and the pole positions in there, but he's getting these steady results, the 7 and the top 10s. You can see a progression in the bike, even with some of the other riders. Honda have won with Zarco. We've seen some signs from Mir. You've seen improvement. With Yamaha, other than Quartararo overriding the bike, have we seen improvement? If you probably break it down, the honest answer to that is no, because Rins still can't do anything. Jack, as much as I love him, just goes backwards. Oliveira's found something, the last 2 races. That's because he's in the shop window and he needs to.
He's desperate.
We've spoken about it so many times. All of a sudden, these riders find form when they need to be in shop window, and that pressure's off, and he's riding for his future, really. So, the honest answer to everything is that Yamaha are not in a good position. Fabio's sugarcoating things, and they need to make a big step. The V4 needs to be that big step. At the moment, it can't be that big step that Fabio needs it and wants it to be. They've got to play this patient game.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I just want to highlight on the Yamaha story, disappoints me that when Jack, before he had the final answer from Yamaha, he was getting fairly good results. Seems to me now that his ride is secure for next year, he's just gone nowhere. And Oliveira, exactly the opposite. He's in the shop window now. Obviously, big rumors about him going to World Superbikes or being a test rider for Aprilia. But whatever it is, suddenly Oliveira seems to... Why does it take almost, I don't want to say a catastrophe, for these guys to... And I mean, I still think Raul Fernandez was exactly the same. As soon as Manu Gonzalez got to ride his bike, since then he's been 25% better than what he's been the whole year. I don't know what it is, Robert. I find it very disappointing. And that to me has been... And I have no negative sentiment towards Jack. I just find that he does this all the time. He's great until his future secured, then he's nowhere. Then beginning of next year, he'll be great again because he'll know for 2027 his future's not secure. He's just too up and down. There's very little consistency. I won't say no. There is no consistency. He crashes all the time too. But it just, I don't know what it is, but it just seems those are the little hiccups you see from and I'm going to call them the midfield runners, which, we know these are the best of the best, but up against the Marquezes and the Alex Marquez and the Bezzeckis, you can't afford to have good week, 3 bad weeks, good week, and their good weeks now become 10th, 11th, 12th. So it's difficult for them, but Yamaha certainly, little bit in the doldrums still. Imagine where they'd be if you didn't have Quartararo on that team.
I was just about to say, after listening to you, can you imagine if Fabio wasn't there, where Yamaha would actually be? It would be a complete disaster. So anyway, they're going to Japan in 2 weeks' time. Japan's always could be a good one, but weather-wise, Japan's always a big spanner in the works for everyone. I'm hoping to see a bounce back from KTM. Is my biggest and first wish. Because I just sung their praises, and this weekend I was just so disappointed, and hopefully something from Pecco Bagnaia. Those are my two wishes going into there, and we could see a new champion crowned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's almost a given. What does he have to do? Score 3 points more than Alex?
Yeah.
Over 2 races, not too difficult. The weather gods can have a big hand in Japan. Japan, to me, is always a great track because you never know what you're getting. Sometimes part of the track's wet, part of the track's dry. When they go under the bridge, there's that fast right-hand corner. It's a treacherous corner. So, to me, Japan's always one of the really interesting races. So I look forward to it, and possibly a new champion.
Let's wait and see, Paul. That's where we're going to leave it for tonight, because I can smell food downstairs and I'm starving and I'm tired. But it's been another great chat. Thank you to everyone in the comments. It's always brilliant hearing everyone's kind of thoughts and getting their perspectives on things, and just having great chats with great people. And Paul, great having you back.
Thanks, Rob.
I was going to give you a demerit because you left me alone last week, but I do understand the circumstances, and it was great to have you back. So I look forward to another great chat in a couple of weeks' time, where we'll talk MotoGP from Japan.
Yeah, Rob, to everyone who tuned in, thank you very much. To you, once again, this has been fantastic. I can't believe it's an hour and a half. It feels like 5 minutes, but really fantastic to just talk MotoGP. We love it. It's passion. And thank you very much. And to everyone who tuned in, enjoy the rest of the evening, those that are still awake, and catch you guys in 2 weeks' time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Cheers.